All right, so we are still on Aquinas, and this is part B. So we had just looked at the question 91 and had finished with, did human beings need a divine law? And the answer is yes, we do need divine law. And he gives 4 reasons there on page 468. Because our end is eternal blessedness, we need a superior law above the natural. In other words, natural law is for all living things, and we are living things. And so our natural laws incline us to good, but because we are also spiritual and seek eternal life with God, then we need divine law to guide us on that higher level. He also says that human judgment errs, so we need something more certain. Hence, divine law doesn't change. God is eternal. God's laws don't change. He also says we cannot see the internal movements of things, but only the exterior. So divine law guides us. In other words, because we have our 5 senses and deal in a physical world, we can't see all the way that everything's all put together, so we need divine law to help us. And lastly, human laws cannot punish all evil deeds, for such laws take away good too. Hence, divine laws leave nothing unpunished. So divine laws also catches, whereas human laws leave things out. Question 94 is a big one. It starts on page 470. And the question he's asking is, does the natural law include several precepts or only one? So, in other words, is there one natural law or is there several? Now, the deal would be if there's several, then we might not have universality. So that can be the problem there. But anyways, look what he says under I answer that. He says, I answer that, as I've said before, the precepts of natural law are related to practical reason, as the first principles of scientific demonstrations are related to theoretical reason. That, by the way, folks, is an analogy. An analogy is like this. A is to B as C is to D. And the way he structured it is this. He has said that natural law, so natural law is to pragmatic reason, or he said practical. Pragmatic, practical, same difference. As scientific principles, I'm going to call that law though, scientific law, science laws, are to theoretical reason. Alright, so notice, right, we've got practical reason and theoretical reason, natural law, and scientific laws. So in other words, in the same way that we use reason to understand these are the abstract and these are the practical, the deal is scientific laws organize and come from theoretical reason. Hence, natural law both organizes our pragmatic reason, and our pragmatic reason tells us the natural laws. So there's a correlation between these two things. Which means then that natural law is a crucial part of our being able to exist on a practical level. That's ultimately where he's going. Okay. Then he continues by saying that both of these types of law, that is, theoretical laws or laws of science and natural laws, are self-evident. You might remember this from the Declaration of Independence. They're self-evident. However, he qualifies this self-evidence by saying there's 2 types, what's in relation to ourselves and self-evident as such. Then he says, basically, the self-evidence comes in this. It is self-evident to people who know the definitions of things, but not self-evident to those who do not know the definitions. So those who are ignorant. Now, the deal is, though, the ignorant can be educated to know the definitions. Here's an example. He uses triangles, right? So an equilateral triangle is equal to all the angles are the same, right, and add up to 180 degrees. Okay, so it's self-evident that triangles add up to 180 degrees, right? Of course, everyone knows that. But what if you don't know what a equilateral triangle is, right? Or you don't know what a triangle is at all. So then you'd be like, well, then it's not self-evident to you. But then all you have to do is understand the nature of triangularity, and no longer you're ignorant. Bam, you are back to self-evident, so you know things. Ultimately, what he's trying to prove with this is to say, you know, you might not be aware of natural law because maybe you just hadn't thought much about it or hadn't been educated to understand it, but it's there. That's all he's trying to say. And here's a quote from there. He says, "The first precept of natural law is that we should do and seek good and shun evil. Since good has the nature of end, and evil the nature of contrary, reason by nature understands to be good all the things for which human beings have a natural inclination, and so to be things to be actively sought. Therefore, the ordination of our natural inclinations ordains the precepts of the natural law." So, there are several precepts of law. Why? Well, because we all understand things differently, right? So some people who understand all kinds of things, they understand the universality. Some people don't. So there are, in fact, several precepts based on the level of our wisdom. But of these precepts of natural law, they incline us to good, incline us to do what is good. Now, what does that mean? Well, let's suppose you have a natural inclination to crave sugar. That's good. Now, obviously, though, if it's taken to extremes, not so good, right? So therein lies the rub. We might say, for instance, we are inclined, for instance, to sexual relationships. Well, that's good, of course. The species wouldn't be here if it wasn't. But then we could also go too far and get into trouble and all that kind of stuff. So this inclination to good is part of the natural precepts, or the very things which incline us to certain actions. Okay. So, if that is the case, then the next one, so this is we're still on Article 94, Question 94, Natural Law. Article 3, he says, do virtuous acts belong to the natural law? Here's what he says. Everything is, by its nature, inclined to the activity that its form renders hitting. For example, fire is inclined to heat things. And so, since the rational soul is a specific form of human beings, everyone has an inclination from one's nature to act with accord with reason. And this is to act virtuously. And so in this regard, all virtuous acts belong to the natural law, since one's own reason by nature dictates that one act virtuously. What? Okay, so in Article 3, we could summarize that to say what? Natural law inclines us to good. This we know, right? But good for us is rational. Why? Because we are rational creatures and have a rational soul. Now, this is where it sounds a lot like Aristotle. And how do we become rational? By being virtuous. And so guess what? Natural law inclines us to be virtuous. Which would mean then, if we were to use tripartite soul stuff here, if this is, reason, this is where we're going to get virtue from. Now, if you think about it, what does that leave here for appetites and emotions? These are the things that are not virtuous, but they're natural, right? So our reason inclines us to rise above these things. And if you think about the 7 deadly sins for a second, right? Think about it. Gluttony, appetite. GL, gluttony. Greed, for stuff, appetite, right? Lust, appetite. Pride, emotion. Sloth, that's a good one. It's an emotion. I'm going to call it appetite because it's about the body. Envy, what is that one? You're envious. I think that we'll call that an emotion. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's still 3 more. Dang it, seriously? Wrath, we'll call that here, right? An emotion. Oh, that's all of them. Good. So if you look at the 7 deadly sins, and I'm talking about sin now because we're talking about Aquinas, right? The Christians were into sin. You never heard the ancients talking about sin. But if you look at it, all the 7 deadly sins are about appetites and emotions, right? So natural law inclines us to want to be virtuous. The trouble, of course, is we're not always successful, right? But that's a whole nother ball of wax, and he's not there yet with that. Okay, so in the 4th one, this is the important one, and this is the one that is of greatest consequence. Is natural law the same for all human beings? So is natural law the same? Because here would be the thing. Remember, if we're going to say that there is human law, then there's natural law, and then there's divine law, right? If we're going to say that all human beings are natural, right, that would mean that these two natural and human laws should coincide. So in other words, you wouldn't have different human laws. But we know from the way that things work, different societies have different laws. So how do you account for that? That's kind of where we're going. So he says, this is on what page for y'all? Page 472, 473. He says, things to which nature inclines human beings belong to the natural law, and it belongs to reason to advance from general principle to the particular. Regarding that process, theoretical reason proceeds in one way, practical reason in another. What? Okay, so he's talking about general principles to particular. Okay, so in other words, you take a rule, right, and then you apply it to a situation. That's all he's saying. I mean, it could be something as simple as, the general rule is, what? To start a car, insert key. So in your Ford Escort, you put the car, you turn the key. Well, in a Toyota Camry, you would also, it's a different situation, but you'd still apply the rule. I mean, that kind of stuff, right? Okay, that's basically how reason works. However, he says that for inasmuch as theoretical reason is especially concerned about necessary things, which cannot be otherwise disposed, its particular conclusions, just like its general principles, are true without exception. So think of things like math and geometry, right? Those are necessary things. So you apply the Pythagorean theorem, which is a general rule, and in every situation of right-angle triangles, it will be the same, right? Here's the important thing. But practical reason is concerned about contingent things. So here's the deal. Contingent means that there are other things that are important in the outcome of a decision, not just one. So if we talk about things being necessary, that means that they are always and absolutely the same. So you'll never find a time when 2 plus 2 does not equal 4. However, contingent means that there are many variables. And so in life, we know that things are not always so simple and easy as math, right? And so when there are many variables, that means you're going to have many possible outcomes dependent on which of these variables is more powerful in any given situation, right? So in other words, it's just like this. You could have, a playbook in football, right? And the quarterback can have the plays, and there's certain scenarios and certain, rules. However, the contingency of the game sometimes goes one way or the other, and so you might not be able to execute the same outcome. To be continued.